boy. What was that about?
I believe we may have blown a tire at some point.
I sure do like me my KLR, I tell you what.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Ben, and I obviously didn't get quite enough done on the XR650L to put out the video that I was intending for this weekend, so that's going to have to hold off until next week, but I think that's alright because I've actually got a topic that I've sort of been meaning to cover for a long time. I've gotten questions about this over the years quite a bit, so even though I'm not a motorcycle mechanic or anything like that, I've had enough experience changing tires and using different tubes that I think I can speak to this a bit, and if any of you guys have any experiences that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear them down in the comments. And for any of you guys who are unfamiliar, a dual sport motorcycle, or at least most dual sport motorcycles with spoked wheels like this, require a tube inside of their tire to actually hold the air in, because every single spoke has a perforation into the rim, and if you were to try to just put a valve stem on the rim and fill a tire with air, they would all just leak out. So on most dual sports and most adventure bikes with spoked wheels, unless they're set up to be tubeless from the factory, you'll have to install some sort of tube, and they all come with a tube from the factory. And back when I first started looking at changing tubes and tires on motorcycles, to be honest, I didn't realize there really were any differences between tubes, but after one particular experience that we'll get into in a second here, I've totally changed my mind on that, and now there's a very specific criteria that I look for in a tube. And some of you guys have been watching me for a long time may remember this, but it's been quite a few years now. When I bought my first KLR, the 2014.5 Gen 2, it came with a set of basically street tires, and they were 90% on-road, 10% off, which basically means they're 100% made for road, and certainly not something that I wanted to take off-road. So I bought a set of the Shinko 804, 805 big blocks and decided that I would try to mount them myself. And I assumed that, well, I could just use the tubes that were in the tires because why not? They were working just fine, right? And that is another thing that I've definitely changed my mind on now. Anytime that I change a tire, I will always swap a tube out, and that's definitely what I would recommend. You can definitely cause yourself some issues just by simply trying to remove the old tire, and when you're going to put the new one back on, that can cause problems. But even beyond that, where the valve stem sort of pokes up through the rim, you can definitely have a bit of water leaking in there if you're somebody that rides, well, outside, and after a while, that moisture that gets in there will eventually start to corrode that valve stem, and once enough corrosion happens, then of course, well, you might have a bit of a leak going on, which is certainly not something that we want, especially when we're on the road. So it's definitely worth the cost to spend a few extra bucks and get a brand new tube to stick in there. Another thing that I've started doing just recently and that I would definitely recommend is sticking little valve gaskets around the stem instead of the locking nut that comes with most tubes. I like that for a couple reasons. One, because it will sort of not lock that valve stem in place. So if you run into a situation where your tire is low on air or something happens that the tire and the tube are able to sort of slip on the rim, you can end up with a situation where the valve stem will stay in place and either maybe still be connected to the tube inside or eventually get ripped off, but in between and up until the point that the tire goes flat, you won't have any idea that anything's wrong because that locking nut just keeps that valve stem in place. So these little guys sort of allow you to, well, see what's going on in there, and they can basically just let the valve stem kind of bend over just a little bit, and hopefully you notice it soon enough that you can go and fix the problem before the tire slips enough to actually rip the tube right off of the stem. Beyond that though, the other really nice thing about them is that they'll actually do a little bit better job keeping the moisture out of the rim, and that's basically because they act as a little bit of a gasket rather than the sort of awkward shaped nut just sort of resting on the top of the cupped rim. So definitely something that I think is worth, again, picking up. They're literally just a couple dollars. And I'll have affiliate links down in the description for all the stuff that helped me to continue making videos like this. Huge thanks to any of you guys that have been using those. But back to my very first tire change. I just decided that I was going to use that original tube because I figured, like I said, it had been working just fine. Why not reuse it? And I'm honestly not sure if it was because of that or it was because I maybe pinched the tube between the spoons and the rim, which can happen very easily, especially on your first couple tire changes. Either way, had I gone with the tube that I used today, I think I would have been in a lot better shape. But anyway, I just decided after getting the rear tire put on and trying to air it up and having all of the air leak back out of it, I was just done and didn't want to mess with it. I didn't really have the right tools. Now I have a whole bunch of tools, again, that I can link down in the description. I should really do a video on sort of my recommendations for the tools since I've used quite a few different ones. But anyway, back then I did not have the right stuff, so I just decided this was enough. I had given it a shot. I just took it to the shop, loaded the new tires and the old wheels into the back of my wife's SUV, and we took it to a motorcycle shop, and I just basically set everything on the counter and said, I would like these tires on these wheels. And about $80, and a couple days later, I had my new wheels and tires to stick back on the KLR. And if you guys are unfamiliar, sort of a good tip if you're mechanically inclined enough and have the right tools to safely get your bike up in the air and get your wheels removed, you can save yourself quite a bit because the shop will of course charge you per hour, and if they take some extra time to both take your wheels off and have to put them back on again, well, they're going to charge you for that. But anyways, after I got my tires mounted back up, I made it, well, probably a couple months, and then the video that I've sort of been alluding to here that maybe some of you guys had seen back in the day, I was riding around Langlade County on the ATV trails, and in Wisconsin here, in a couple counties actually, dual sport motorcycles are allowed on the ATV trails, but those ATV trails are very, very rocky, and I'm not sure exactly what combination of factors led to it, but by the time I got out to the pavement and started to go around a couple corners, something felt kind of off.
Oh boy, what was that about? Holy.
Huh. Well, no wonder that doesn't seem right. I believe we may have blown a tire at some point.
And at first, I really had no idea what was going on. I just knew that I certainly wasn't able to get a tire or tube changed in my garage, so I didn't have any tools or any supplies to try to patch a tube, and I really didn't want to mess with it anyway. So even though I was an hour away from home, at that time we didn't have any kids, so I was able to just call my wife, and she just came and picked me up in my truck. And we loaded my very heavy Gen 2 KLR in the back of my 99 Silverado, which was lifted 6 inches and had 35-inch tires on it, which was definitely a pretty sketchy situation.
Well, there we go. I never thought I'd see that, but we got a KLR 650 in the bed of a pickup.
Thankfully, we got it home, and I believe I ended up just taking the tire off and taking it back to that same shop. And I assumed that I had maybe, had some sort of puncture or something like that, and that's why it went flat, but I couldn't find anything, so I asked the shop, what was going on, why did my tire go flat? And essentially they said somewhere on sort of the sidewall of the tube, there was just a big split in it. So thinking back to where I was riding and thinking about what possibly could have caused that, I realized that it was probably one of those big rocks that I had smashed up against, and essentially I made another mistake by just basically handing the tire to them saying, please put a new tube in it. And the mistake that I made there, both the first and the second time, was that I just told them to put a tube in there. I didn't say, I'm going to be riding this bike off-road on really gnarly, rocky trails. A standard motorcycle tube is not really meant to be off-road. There are several different options out there. A standard tube is somewhere around 1 millimeter thick, meaning the actual material between, the tire and where the air is inside. And obviously, the thicker you make that, the tougher it's going to be. So I use my sponsor from Rocky Mountain ATV, Tusk, for tubes in all of my bikes now. The XR650L here has the 3 millimeter thickness, and they sell them in a 2 millimeter, a 3 millimeter, like I'm using, and then also a 4 millimeter. I'd be interested if any of you guys have a philosophy on going with either the 2, 3, or 4 millimeter tubes and what you like best, if you think there's any reason not to go with the super heavy duty ones. I can't really think of one other than the weight. I suppose the best way to decide what thickness you need for your own personal situation is to kind of decide what terrain you'll be riding on, how heavy your bike is, and I guess maybe how aggressive of a rider you are. If you think you're gonna need a thicker, heavier duty tube, then obviously go in that direction. If you're somebody that spends most of your time on the pavement and just a little bit of gravel, then maybe a 2 millimeter will be just fine. And even though you should really always be putting a little bit of air, at least as far as I'm aware, in your tubes when you're mounting tires, just having that slightly thicker, meatier tube kind of makes it hold its shape a little bit better. And I found that I've just run into a few less issues with it getting pinched or in a place that it could get pinched between my spoon and the rim. So that's definitely nicer, but of course, being out on the trails, they give me so much more confidence, and I have not had an issue since. Of course, I do ride a little bit more carefully around rocks now, but again, I've ran into zero issues. They've been holding up great, and of course, there are lots of different brands out there. I don't care if you guys use the Tusk brand or anything else. If there's something else out there that you think would work better, that's definitely what you should go with. But again, if you want to help me make more videos like this, there'll be affiliate links to the products that I use down in the description. There is, I suppose, one thing that I should mention about the Tusk tubes though, and it's only happened once, and manufacturing errors is definitely something that is not specific to any inexpensive or really expensive products. It happens all across the board. And I know that because I worked at a manufacturing company for 12 years, and being in the industry, I've seen lots of different brands sort of have problems, and it's just something that happens. We're all human, we make mistakes, things happen. And the good companies are the ones that will fix the problems if there are any issues. And this was one that was really, I guess, kind of a small issue, but I think is one that's worth mentioning. And it was when I mounted the Tusk D-Sport tires on my Gen 3 KLR, which I would not recommend, at least the front D-Sport for that bike. It's just way too heavy and the tire is just too knobby. I think actually a Waypoint tire would probably be a really good option on that bike. But when I put, I believe it was the front tube in, I aired both of them up and checked them, but there was something goofy about the front, and I don't remember exactly what happened, but then much later on, I decided to check my tire pressures just to make sure everything was still good. And when I went to check the pressure on the front, or maybe it was the rear, I don't remember, it's been too long now. But when I went to check it, something really weird happened, and it would only register just a little bit of air, but then I would put a bit more air in, and it would still just register the same. And when I would put air in, it acted kind of funny. And it turned out that there was a little piece of rubber sort of stuck in on, I guess, the inside of where the Schrader valve insert is. And thankfully I was able to pull that little Schrader valve core out and grab the piece of material that was stuck in there and yanked it out, and then it worked just fine. I had no issues. But if you ever run into a situation where you're putting air in but the pressure doesn't seem to be making any sense with the amount of air that should be in there, that's definitely something to look at. I'm not sure exactly why it happened. I think it was probably just something for the manufacturing process, just a little extra piece of something that was in there. I think I would probably just recommend swapping the tube out, since obviously having a faulty tube could definitely be a hazard out on the road. But I ran it that way after I pulled that little piece out till, well, I burned the tire completely off after about 3,000 or so miles, and then stuck a different tire on it. Again, I think it was more of a fluke than anything, and it hasn't stopped me from using the Tusk products. And again, I would still recommend them, but like I said, of course, whatever you think is going to work best for you is what you should purchase. So hopefully that was helpful to you guys. If it was, let me know down in the comments. Hit that like button. All that helps me out and helps me to continue making videos, as does when you guys use those affiliate links down in the description. And again, huge thanks to all of you guys that have been using those. Huge thanks to my channel members out there that help support me and help me keep my dream job. And also huge thanks to all of you guys that watch and share the videos. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, stay safe, stay swanky, get out there and enjoy this beautiful world God created any chance you get. And hey, if you can't do that right now, here's some more videos to check out in the meantime. I'm gonna get back to work on this bike.